long. All right, Dexter, looks like the recording's working, so go ahead and get us started.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Workload Automation Distributed Global User Community Webcast. My name is Dexter Stark, and we're off. I'm going to start out, as always, and tell you about who won the raffle, and then I'm going to give you a recap of my personal experience at CA World 2014. Then we're going to turn it over to our good friend Mark Warren, who's going to give us his update on workload automation solutions. Then for our feature presentation, we have Dan Harrington of Robert Mark Technologies, and his presentation is entitled Automating AE and DE Agent Deployment and Configuration. Now, our winner for our Amazon gift certificate was Charlene Matheson of SC Data Center, Inc. She won a $100 gift certificate to Amazon.com. And the way she won it, she just simply attended the webcast. The day after the webcast, she was randomly selected. We verified that she is indeed a member and has been a member since May of 2010. The good news for any of you out there that are on this webcast that are not members is we're not going to do the random drawing until tomorrow, so you have plenty of time after the webcast to go out to CA communities and sign up for the workload automation global user community and become a member. And you'll be eligible to win the $100 gift certificate. Unfortunately for myself, as a board member and CA employees are not eligible, and I'll make the announcement our next webcast. Now, this year I was very fortunate to attend CA World 2014. It's been a long time since I was able to go. It was held in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the Mandalay Bay. First up, the sessions. My favorite thing about CA World is customer-led sessions. The customer-led sessions that were there were really good. I was just a little disappointed. I wish there would have been more, but the ones that were there was really good quality. It looked like it was really lacking on the DE side. Hopefully, I put in some suggestions with my survey, and hopefully they'll beef that up next. But the sessions that were there were really good, and it was worth attending. The exhibition center was really nice. They had something called an expert bar, and it was really nice. It was an actual bar, and there were stools in front of it, and you can go talk to an expert in your area. For us, I seen Mike Woods was manning the bar several times, and you could just walk up and sit down with Mike Woods and talk about workload automations, any questions, any problems you're having. So it was just a really good opportunity, no appointment, just go up and talk to an expert. The high-value network area was really nice, and my management that also attended really took full advantage of this area. We had several meetings with CA where we sat down with the developers. We sat down with the product managers. We held an extra session where we just talked about agents, talked about issues that our company was facing. Also, we had a meeting with other companies, and we had a roundtable. It was like a local user group meeting. It was really nice where we just went around the table and talked about the issues that we were facing. So that was a really good experience. The keynotes were good, especially Magic Johnson. He was a really good speaker. He went around and took selfies with people. It was pretty funny. Unfortunately, I didn't get one. But he did talk about how he took a franchise of Starbucks and put it in an urban environment, and how he adjusts the menu to cater to his customers, and how, the things he did to make that a success in his catering business. And he also talked about his time in the NBA. It was really cool. He talked about his rivalry with Larry Bird. It was really cool. So it was a great experience. Event night was fun. They had the Fray come in and perform while they had pool tables, ping pong tables, and they had, it has to be the world's largest foosball tables. I've never seen foosball tables like this before. They were like 25 feet long. There's 10 people on each side playing foosball. It was really cool. But my absolute favorite thing was our reception. We've been doing this for years now, and this is by far the highly attended. We had about 150 people. Gene did a real good job helping us put this together. and we had a great venue. You could see here, we're in the foyer. You look out the window and see the Vegas lights. It was just beautiful. A lot of people. It was a great time. I got to meet a lot of you, get reacquainted. You talk face to face. It was really a good experience, and we'll plan on doing that again. They did announce that they were going to have CA World is an annual event, not every 18 months, and that next year it's going to be in November at the Mandalay Bay. So if you'd like to go, make sure you use that agenda builder. That's a good tool to convince your management to go. Show them exactly what you're going to do and what you're going to get out of it. Tell them about the expert bars in the high-value network area and the keynotes, and maybe even you could speak. You could be a client speaker. So with that is my my recap of CA World 2014, and at this time I'd like to turn it over to our good friend Mark. Mark?
Thank you, Dexter. If you can just pass it over, thank you, and I'll share.
Okay, Mark.
Or do you reclaim host?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. You're good.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Should be coming up here in a second.
Okay, great.
Okay. So it'll swap here in a second. I'm sure you're seeing two screens, and now you should see one. So good morning to all. Hope you'll be able to see my desktop without issues. Again, my name is Mark Warren. I'm the Director of Product Management here for Workload. And realistically, CA is going through a branding process and a reorganization process where we're also moving forward. We will also include the output solutions, the mainframe automation solutions, as well as the XCOM product line as well. Will all now fall into the new categories, which is IT orchestration. So moving forward, what we're going to do with these solutions, we'll start with DE. The big thing with DE was we just released the new service pack for DE, which also includes the new desktop. So it is a desktop still. We're working on a new UI for it long term, but we did improve some of the features and functions such as the flow, the calendars, visualization with all within DE so that it gives it a much cleaner look and feel. That's available now. So those of you that are running DE, you should look at the latest service pack. Job monitoring, we've also improved that as well with this new interface. And we're starting to work on two pieces with DE today. One of them is a multi-threaded process. DE is a single-threaded process, so we're looking at how we improve performance. And we're going to do that by changing some of the threads. Serenibus, the product owner, is posting to the community site, looking for people to review the sprints and so forth. So keep your eyes on that going forward with R12, which will be out late this year. We're also going to have Hadoop, advanced integration, SAP agents, Cognos and Teradata, we're not sure on yet, but we're going to try and make those as well. We've also improved the installer in such, and I'll give you an example of what we're doing with DE right now. We're running a test so that we can actually use a free database and install DE in the cloud. So we're looking at can we distribute Postgres with DE, have it tuned, and users can actually install the product in the cloud. It's much lightweight in this fashion. The DE customer base has been asking for this, as well as we're developing a new UI, which is web-based. for DE. The reportings, one of the reporting improvements that we're looking at is all around the forecasting and the way that DE forecasts and presents that back. So again, keep your eyes open and watch the community sites. But with DE, there's a lot of activity taking place, and there will be so for the next 6 to 8 months. All around HA, performance, reporting, and UI. So we talked about it, and we've already certified with Oracle. Again, the enhanced reporting process has started. We separated the memory from the core server, which allows better performance. We've also added step alert and end notifications for ZOS job types, LDAP integrations, and with SFTP, we also now allow ASCII as well as transfers, binary transfers, key authentication, pass authentications as well. This is in the field today. Went GA earlier in December. And again, what's our plans? Our plans is to improve performance, high availability, user interface. User interface and stability, really that comes down to, the stability part comes to HA. Improved UI, we know that we need a user interface so that we can take this to the cloud and use a web interface. Application and job definitions will be changing, and job type monitoring improvements, such as including iDash with this solution, which is scheduled. And I'll skip the next couple here and jump into AE since we're limited on time here. Planned innovations. Let's talk about AE 12, which will scheduled for later this year. 64-bit application fully, so that there's no longer a need for AutoSys administrators to go off and get 32-bit drivers for various applications. Hadoop integrations, which will include new job types for Hadoop, as well as Informatica, SAP, BIPI, and HANA will be out this year. WCC, for those of you that have not seen the new release, 11.4 is available. Will go available at the end of this month. It does not include the app editor, so we will release it as what we call a limited availability. And the customers that would like to use it for monitoring and so forth can do so. We'll have the app editor in within the next 4 months, and then we'll take it full GA. But we've had a lot of requests for this. It's a very, very nice UI, and we'll continue to build on top of that. Going forward with AE, we're looking at agent management and monitoring. So now that the agents will be able to be monitored, I know some of the team, some of the members here have seen CAM that we've designed and prototyped, but basically we will start with monitoring of agents to start with, and then we will go to management of agents. We've updated the iDash interface, so now iDash is integrated with EEM. We're building a new UI for iDash, which will be available June timeframe, if not sooner. And then the RESTful web services have been extended as well, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. We have a service pack for AutoSys that's getting ready to go GA, scheduled for the end of next week. It's in the final stages of testing, which will include alert notifications so that when the agent now reaches its thresholds as far as disk space is concerned, it will now alert the engines The engines will now post that, and you will receive your alerts within the console. That's one of the new enhancements that we've included with that. And that's in the Service Pack 1 that's scheduled to go out, again, for 11/3/6 at the end of next week. And with that, Dexter, I'll turn it over. Unless somebody has some questions, they can drop me in.
Okay, it looks like you do have a question.
Okay. I'm trying to see here.
See it in the Q&A. Will the
Yeah,
new WCC support dual database for true HA of the application in case of database failure?
The second version will. The first version will not. The first drop will not, but the second drop will.
Okay, great. Okay, well, now it's okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll pass control over to our friend.
Okay, great. Hey, this is time for our feature presentation here. Dan, it's all yours.
Okay. Just.
You should have it, Dan.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
No problem.
Go. Beginning. All right. Hey, folks. This is a presentation on automating AE and DE agent deployment and configuration, and specifically leveraging Devops tools to manage AE and DE infrastructure. From a high level, the new system agent that CA introduced on the AE side, DE's, I guess, dealt with this for a longer period of time. But the new system agent added features and to those platforms that expanded functionality, but it also brought with it new operational challenges, right? And this includes, and people who are looking at the upgrades and looking at switching over to DE, this conversation comes up very early on. The agent parm configuration file, if you're doing profiles or controlling environmental variables, you can do that. There are switches within the agent parm.txt to control pointing to server or environment or job level variables. There's also permissions on directories and making sure that you just have standardization of your install. That's always been a recurring issue, but it's part of the challenges that you face when rolling out, even 3 or 4 dozen agents, right? So it really becomes, how do you, once you get done with your implementation phase, how do you operationally manage this environment going forward? So what I'm going to do is step through a solution that leverages current DevOps tool offerings, what we see in the marketplace today. Okay, so I'll start with defining our problem space, then talk about the infrastructure solution. Part of what that's going to drive is a little different approach to the way we've looked at historically our separation of environments, so rethinking environments within the tools themselves, how you define, excuse me, your management items, what you're going to focus on, and I can give you some idea of how we've approached this at different sites, and then how you handle maintenance and updates going forward operationally, how you reduce costs of applying patches and rolling things out, and then finally some examples of work I did using Puppet Enterprise. So our agent management problem, right? So I just took the number 800 because that was close to, the problem set that I dealt with before. But really, how do you roll out 800 system agents and ensure standardization of install paths, right? How do we ensure all 400 Windows system agents have the same profile entries in agent farm.txt? How do we ensure that all our Unix machines use the same shell to invoke jobs and then push it to users to control anything beyond that point? How do we ensure that our SAP plugin or our PeopleSoft plugin servers have the correct connection information and that no one changes it or breaks it? Because those applications, scheduling for those applications tends to be mission critical for a lot of sites. So a system administrator goes in there, changes one of those files, and all of a sudden you get called at 2 in the morning, and you're making changes to configuration files on a specific agent. So how do we stop that that incident from occurring in the first place? And then other things like how do we ensure our SFTP servers have standardized and correct settings? And from a security perspective, how are we ensuring that we've only opened up the ports necessary on that server? Because of Sony security's in the news, right? So, attackers look for open ports, and we want to make sure that we've locked down at least the workload space so that we're not having open ports hanging out there unnecessarily. So the infrastructure folks, system administration teams have dealt with this problem for a long time. And that's where Devops tools really come from. They come from system administrators who've had a need to, as their workload has increased. We've been around, most of us have been around in the business for a very long time. And when we watch virtualization sort of change the dynamic for the system administrators, they used to be hired individuals before and always at a time when they managed 10 to 15, even 25 to 30 real machines. But we've seen in the last 10 years that those system administrators are now managing 100 to 150 virtual machines. And the problems they faced is, once you move into that problem domain, how you ensure that you've standardized your OS, how you ensure that you've essentially reduced your chances for having production problems. And you do that by making sure that the way you install machine A is exactly the way you install machine B, right? So that becomes, that becomes a bigger issue. So DevOps tools come out of trying to deal with that problem space, right? And these tools are used to manage, like I said, heterogeneous OS environments, right? So Windows, Unix, like HP, UX, AIX, Linux, Red Hat, the Debian-based versions, throughout the spectrum, as well as getting into the iSeries side and things like that. And they're used to manage homogeneous application environments, right? So when you're dealing with a web server farm and you have 100 Apache servers, right, how do you ensure that all those Apache servers have the same configuration? And the reason I spend some time talking about this is because the challenges that are faced in that problem domain are the same challenges that we face from a workload automation perspective. If I have 100 system agents and they're all essentially, running on Apache web servers and connecting to an Apache application, unless there's a driving need, their agent farm.txt should really look the same, right? So, that's the same challenge that the system administrators face in making sure the Apache httpd.conf file looks exactly the same across their 100 servers. So within this space, there's many tools that standardize deployment, right? CA software delivery, I've spent a lot of time working with that. That's one of them that I found is very good in being able to push out 100 system agents, 800 system agents. You can create a package and deploy it with that tool. But you know, there are plenty of others in that space. Puppet Enterprise has that ability, Chef and a couple of other the DevOps tools. But, you know, in and of itself, just delivering software to the servers is sort of a solved problem. There are many different tools that do that. And then managing operational management. This is where the DevOps tools typically shine, because going forward, after you deliver your software, how do you maintain a configuration file? How do you deal with configuration drift? And I mean, honestly, the software delivery is the minor part, the minor aspect of our use case, right? It's a one and done. Once we deliver the agents to those machines, you know, the software delivery portion is done. It's really when you turn this over to the operational team where they have to manage this going forward, that's where they see the crux of their problems. So handling configuration drift and managing changes. So a new build of the system agent comes out, how do you roll that out in a controlled manner so it's tested and you can show your management that, yes, this is our testing plan and this is our process and this is how we ensure that we're not disrupting the business when we roll out changes. And that's really, that space is really where we see the DevOps tools shine. So essentially, the DevOps approach to this is they use groups to classify the infrastructure. So I'll set up an FTP server group, an SCP server group, a SAP server group, a PeopleSoft server group, and then that collection of servers are within the DevOps tool are then within that group. And the DevOps tools use what's called models. And anybody that's familiar with the days of software delivery and configuration management tools, there was this term of gold standard where you created a template and it made sure that you know, everything defined within that template was adhered to on that server. That was a gold standard. And you change the template as necessary. Models are a similar is the analogy in the DevOps space. So you create a model server in the dev environment, and that model server is where changes are made, and then once they're tested, it's pushed through. Configuration drift gets eliminated by reverting everything in the higher environments back to what the model should look like. And then unauthorized changes are, you know, automatically rolled back as part of if someone goes in and changes in QA or goes in and changes in production, those changes are rolled back by the tools. As I mentioned earlier, Puppet Enterprise is what I've used at sites to work in this problem space and solve a lot of these issues. And it fills in the gap for the initial deployment challenges, and then becomes essential in the configuration drift and lifecycle management space. And that's where we see these tools really start to shine. So one of the things that has to happen is we need to rethink environments. Your management sort of needs to approach these environments a little bit differently. I know I've been an architect in this space for a long time, and separation of environments has been one of the things that, one of the heuristics that I've used when architecting environments, making sure that dev is dev and QA is QA and production is production. And you can't schedule between those environments from a workload automation perspective. And that's the mindset that we come from, because it opens, there's security risks, there's impact risks to production. You know, and typically when we go into a site and we're helping them with an upgrade or something like that, and we see something like that, it becomes a red flag, right? It becomes something we start to get worried about. Whereas in the DevOps tool space, we have to rethink that approach. Your DevOps tools need to see all environments. They need to be able to touch all environments. They need to be able to touch development, touch QA, touch production, because that's the life cycle that your workload automation infrastructure goes through, right? And I mean, that's how typically we've approached it. You know, when we operationally manage our patches or our upgrades, we start in the lowest environment, right? We run it through the lowest environment. We test it. We make sure it works in the lowest environment. And then once it's baked in there, we move up to our integration testing, our QA environments where users are actually working and running jobs and making sure that we don't have impacts there. And if there are errors, we take that issue, we isolate root cause, we get it fixed, and we apply those changes in QA or in dev. Well, if we apply them in QA, we make sure they roll back to dev, or we apply them in dev and push them up to QA. But however we do it, we make sure that that's the space that it goes in. And then from there, we would push it up to production after a certain amount of QA testing. And we do that through process, right? We make sure that that's the process that we use, although someone can come in and make changes to production. And, you know, we've done that at 2 in the morning when we want to get back to bed, and we've found the root cause and know that tomorrow we'll come in and we'll roll the changes back through QA. But at least we've gotten the business up and running, and they can start running. And we haven't, you know, we haven't broken them at that point. So the difference in approach is management really needs to take a look at this workload automation as a life cycle approach. There's a life cycle of the environment. It starts in dev, it moves to QA, and it goes to production. And there can be more environments in there, but it's going to move from the lower environments to the higher environments. So what you end up having, and in some sites it may require changes at the network layer and changes at the firewall layer, but environments are no longer separated by firewalls or network divisions, right? At least from your Devops tools, they need to be able to see all these environments and understand the life cycle. Your production Devops tools are going to look across, like I said, from the lower environments to the higher environments. And, you know, it starts much like a regular life cycle. You have an infancy period in dev, your youth in QA, and your maturity in production. And the thing that's going to happen once this is in place is the tools are going to enforce the process, right? You can no longer just go into production and make changes because the tools themselves are going to enforce rolling back those changes. You have to start in a lower environment. They have to burn through the lower environment, right? So emergency changes can still be made. That's not to say there isn't an emergency change process. It's just that on typical changes, they're enforced by the tool set, right? So that helps us ensure that, you know, there's standardization in the environment. So with the Devops tools, what they use is they use hierarchy and inheritance, and that allows us to build, you know, a deep structure of controlling various items, especially when you get to configuration of the agent-parm.txt files. It allows you to deploy the agent-parm.txt and ensure that you have the right agent-parm.txt deployed for those servers. So this may be a little small, but you know, at the bottom, I guess, the base and foundation, you're going to have a base class that contains the directory permissions. So if I want it world readable or group writable or however we have it set up, that's an attribute of the base class. We want these permissions on these directories. We want it installed into, our expectation is that the final state is the way Puppet Enterprise looks at it, so we describe the final state. The final state is it should be installed in this directory, it should have these permissions, and it requires this prerequisite software. So if it's a Linux server, it's going to require glibc, and then every system agent deployment is going to have that standardized approach, right? And then from the base class, we can have specific classes peel off and inherit that, right? So the Windows class, you know, my agent parm settings contain Windows-specific settings for profiles and things specific to the Windows environment, right? The same thing with iSeries on the Unix side. You can create FTP servers. So the agent parm text and new features of the agent, being able to run an FTP server through the agent is, you know, a huge advantage. You're able to deliver files to the system using the agent itself, using the functionality of the agent itself without having an outside FTP server. But you only want that enabled on some of your machines. You don't need that enabled on all 800 system agents. You only want it enabled on, you know, the 30 or 40 that you need to do FTP for, or SFTP for. And that, you know, you set up your FTP class and you push that out. And then you can roll down to further lower levels of the hierarchy. So within Windows, I can have IIS-specific settings for, you know, in my agent parm.txt what I need for that. In Unix, I can enforce a default shell for my environment, and then if the jobs themselves are using a different shell, that's controlled by the users at the job level. But it allows me to standardize and know that by default, everybody's going to be running jobs in the bash shell, or they're going to be running jobs in the C shell, or what have you. So this, and using this philosophy of building out the classes in this way allows us to push and control the layering of what specifically should be the agent parm.txt that we deliver, or the log files and the profiles that we deliver to that machine. And then finally, maintenance and updates. You know, changes to the AE or DE system agent must be made at the lowest stage, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, the tool is enforcing this, right? So at the dev layer, we're going in and we're applying our new build to the agent. We're letting it bake in, right? So, you know, that spends its time sort of baking into the environment and allows us to make sure that there's no catastrophic issues, right? And then from there, you know, once it bakes in for that amount of time, I think at Nike we used a week or 2 weeks in dev, and then we would promote it to QA. And at that point, you know, I had an almost full schedule running, and users were testing. So just, you know, I'd use the tool to push out to that QA environment and know that the users are going to be running full schedules in there, and it was going to sort of shake out and test itself. There was no additional testing necessary at that point, right? So the workload teams adhere to normal testing and QA for the designated period and open up issues, right? We'd send out notification, we've updated the build in QA, and if there are any issues, please contact us or open an issue as appropriate. And we, you know, if there was an issue open, we go back and we trace the root cause, and then we could revert back in and apply it in dev. But after those issues were resolved and everything looked good, we'd push the new build out to production. At that point, you know, essentially we were done. We've got the agent now, and the new build of the agent now in production, and can just sort of let it ride from there. If changes need to be made, or we find out in production we've hit an issue we didn't see in QA, it's easy to roll back, right? So we can now roll back those changes to the previous state, and you know, figure out why in QA, figure out why we had a problem, right? And the other aspect of this is you can then turn around to your auditing teams and your management and say, you know, our dev agents match our QA agents, match our production agents, and from a testing perspective, we're apples to apples. And you'll see there's a caveat to that. I mean, the testing perspective from workload automation, right? I can make sure that my system agents and the environment that they run in within workload matches what it does in QA, because I'm using a tool that enforces that. I don't have to guess at that. I don't have to go into configuration files and see what does this QA machine have in its agent parm.txt. Oh, it has these settings. I forgot that this machine was a little bit different. That's not the case, right? I know that, you know, I have this this environment all across. Okay, so with Puppet Enterprise, how I've used this in the past is for the deployment aspect, what I had to do first was build a package. So what we did was I initially first went into RPM, and me and the system administrator sat down and tried to take apart or tried to wrap the CA installer in RPM. And then in our testing, very early on in the testing, we ran into an RPM DB lock. The CA installer actually uses RPM because we're targeting a Linux environment to roll this out to. And that's why we're using RPM, the Red Hat package manager. The CA installer uses the RPM command to insert entries into the RPM DB. And that's why we're getting a lock, because our RPM process would lock the database, and then CA's installer would then try to insert an RPM, and they'd get a database lock, and our install would hang. So what we ended up doing was there was two ways to approach this. The system administrator, the Linux system administrator, were talking about the different options. One was to hack well, not hack RPM, but in RPM that we could run or spawn off child processes, which seemed like a bad idea and would get us into trouble in 6 months. And then, so we decided not to go that route. The other one was to hack the CA installer, which also seemed like a bad idea, because the first time we called CA support said, you know, we're installing, and they wanted to look at our installer, and we showed them that we took apart the CA installer. One of the things support would do, and from a testing perspective, from a support perspective, it's a genuinely valid position to put forward, is that you need to run the CA installer and install it correctly, and then see if you have the same problem, right? Because we may have done something that broke the CA installer. So both of those options seemed like a bad idea. So what we ended up doing was building a self-installer, a self-installing tarball. The advantage was we could use it across Unix environments, and then you know, on Windows, we'd wrap it in a bash script. So Windows is obviously, you're going to have different approaches depending on the OS, but that allowed us to, the self-installing tarball essentially allowed us to get around this. So we built that package using shell script, and it really just wrapped the CA installer. And then the Puppet system, we put that into our network share. So we put that out there on the software delivery network share, so that Puppet would know it's there. And when we said, you know, these agents need this, these systems need the system agent, it would then push it out there. And it would do that in an automated fashion. We wouldn't have to worry about it. So the tasks I went through was build the package, build the system, the Puppet system agent module within Puppet, define the entries within Puppet, so Puppet understood what should be on these machines, and then deploy them through Puppet, and then update the agent parm.txt to demonstrate that it reverted it back, or change permissions on a file. So with Puppet, what you do is a Puppet module is a self-contained bundle of code and data. Puppet has its own sort of declarative language. It's not a very complex language. It's sort of analogous to GIL a little bit, in that it's very simple and generally easy to read. So it's really only used to declare a link between the machines or groups, resources. So like a system agent is a resource. You're saying, you know, this machine needs this resource, and then the relationship between those resources. So I could have dependencies between resources, right? So for instance, the system agent, we know Linux needs a certain level of glibc, right? So you can tell Puppet within that declarative language that, hey, before I install the system agent, just make sure there's this version of glibc out there, right? And Puppet will handle that and make sure that it's put out there using its deployment. It has to be within the deployment environment. And then data are any of the files or binaries needed to be delivered to the machine. So, for instance, the agentparm.txt, an updated agentparm.txt would be data that's delivered. So for our FTP servers, we need to turn on our FTP plugin, or PeopleSoft, we need to turn on a PeopleSoft plugin. That's a specific agentparm.txt file, and that text file is considered data from a Puppet perspective, and that gets delivered down there. Excuse me. And then, like I said, we put the bundled installer out on the network share for installation, so Puppet knew where that was. And then when we said, hey, we created a system agent group in Puppet. So we said all these machines, we want them to have system agents on them. And then Puppet went, you know, it has an agent out there on the machine. It looks at the machine and says, oh, the system agent isn't installed. And we put one out there. It goes to the installation share where the installation media is, grabs it, and pushes it out to those machines. And then it adds a system agent class. We added a system agent class to our system agent group. So within that group, we have different classes. So we'll have an FTP class, we'll have, or an SFTP class, we'll have a PeopleSoft class, an SAP class. And what that does is it makes sure that it gets delivered, the correct agentparm.txt gets delivered, right? And Puppet then pushes out the system agent automatically. And then after the system agent exists on that machine, because if I want an FTP or an SFTP server plugin activated, one of the requirements, one of the things I'm making sure is that a system agent already exists on the machine, right? So the system agent exists, so therefore an agentparm file exists. Now all I need to do is update that machine with a new agentparm.txt. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, we can go over to questions now, but you know, I just wanted to go back here to touch on when you're dealing with these multiple PeopleSoft, SAP environments like that, and you're dealing with all these different configurations, you want to approach them from a grouping perspective, right? And that grouping will allow you to maintain them. The base class you use for things on a higher level, like your permissions, the default files that should be in there after the install, things like that, you know, I know sites get issues with system administration teams coming in and essentially breaking, when they touch a server, they may break it so let me just get back to the and so they go in and they change something on the system, and that may be changing permissions, and it touches the system agent directories. You get called at 2 in the morning because jobs aren't running, right? And you can reduce those incidents altogether using some tool like this. So that's in the base system agent class, and Puppet's maintaining and monitoring that by looking for any changes. Any changes, then it reverts back to what we've defined our model to be, right? So, all right, Dexter.
Yeah.
Anybody has any questions?
Looks like you have a question. Do you see it? If everyone, if you have any questions, just type them in the Q&A. Do you see those, Dan?
Yeah, I don't.
First one looks like it might be more for Mark.
Oh, there's one frequent user of the DE product, a web interface. I guess there's a question about a web interface, Mark. Is there a web interface? I know you mentioned iDash. Is there something on the roadmap for DE for a web interface?
Yes, and that's being actively pursued today. So for DE, there is a new UI that's being investigated as we speak, what it's going to take, what is the investment and so forth, and we hope to have it out as quickly as possible. So in order for us to run successfully in the cloud with DE, we know we have to have a UI that is web-based, not desktop-based.
It looks like there's a question from Jim for you, Dan. How does the tool compare to the upcoming CA agent management and cost?
Oh, from a CAMS perspective. CAMS, it's going to, and I'll sort of rely on Mark to keep me honest because I've just sat through his presentations on it, but CA is targeting monitoring as the initial release. So from that perspective, in the initial release, you're going to be able to monitor agents, whereas these tools like Puppet or Chef are, what they're doing is they're monitoring, but they're not really, their position isn't to monitor the environment. Their position is really to automatically handle brain dead stuff like reverting permissions on a directory, making sure that if someone goes in and makes changes to the system, those are approved changes. They started in dev and they went through the entire life cycle. So right now they don't play in the same space. Where CAMS goes in their roadmap and what Mark and those guys have talked about, I think you may get cross functionality. You may see cross functionality there in later versions of the roadmap.
No, we're actually looking at integrating with Puppet and Chef. So with the agent and so forth, we're looking at building the packages, creating the XML files and so forth for the agent so it can be loaded into Puppet and into Chef for deployment and so forth, the offerings around those two solutions. We have met with Puppet and we've met with Chef as well. And we're going through that legal process now. But we definitely have a vested interest. I know Verizon is a big Puppet user, as well as there's a whole list of communities that are using and starting to use Puppet and Chef. So those look like these software deployment packages for the near future.
Yeah, so that's why it's good to have you on the phone more. So what you're going to see is CAMS is going to leverage the Devops tool space to deliver the same functionality, right? And they'll be on top. I guess you guys will be on top monitoring and operationally notifying when these types of things occur and allow you to see, because the one thing Puppet's not going to tell you where CAMS is it's not going to tell you what version of system agent you currently have in your production environment. And that's, you know, part of what you guys, I think, are looking to get out the door in your monitoring phase, right, Mark? To be able to take a snapshot of the environment and say, this is what it looks like. This is our topology. That's what we called it at Nike. You know, when that question, my management would ask me that question all the time. What version of agent are we running? You know, what version do we have out there deployed in production? And in some cases, we'd have to do some research because we had an issue here and we upgraded this agent, whereas a tool like CAMS gives us that ability just by looking at a screen, right? So, and then from a cost perspective, you asked about costs. So Puppet, both Puppet and Chef are open source, so I don't have cost numbers. You'd have to talk to them for Puppet Enterprise and Chef from an enterprise perspective. What you're paying for is the support costs, support and maintenance costs. But both Puppet and I believe Chef as well are free on a 5 or 10 agent license. So for small deployments, they allow you to use the version of the product for free. And it allows you to go in and test and learn because Puppet and Chef have subtle differences that you know, it's sort of like a VI Emacs thing. If you like to get involved in holy wars, or so it can be a little bit of a there's a difference in people adhere to either one. There are other tools out there. I mentioned a couple I haven't really used, but Salt, Ansel, and a couple others as well. So I'm not sure about the licensing costs of those guys, but I know Puppet, like I said, Puppet Enterprise is for deployments over 10 agents, and it comes with graphical user interface at the top, stuff like that that's web-based. And then Sean Roberts asked if this is a formal product or a services offering. It's a formal product. My experience was I first got exposure to it at Nike. We had one of our customers in their environment, they only used Puppet. So you know, when we provided the install media, you know, because they manage their own infrastructure, we provided the install media. They came back and they said, you know, this doesn't work. We need an RPM package. And I was like, well, we can wrap it in an RPM, but what are you looking to do? Why, you know? So we sat down. They were talking, and they said, you know, we don't touch QA or production. We just touch dev, and we build out in dev, and then we push those changes up to the environment. So it's completely. They developed it on their own. They just, you know, bought the tool from Puppet and then used it to manage their infrastructure. And after watching what they did, one of my big questions is, hey, I need to do that at the enterprise level because I need to not get calls at 2 in the morning on agent failures or all the, you know, you can just go through your list in ServiceNow or CA Service Desk and pull out your top 10 tickets, and you'll find invariably within that top 10, there's something that's system related. That file systems get full, that permissions get changed. They'll be in your top 10. And one of the ways to sell this to your management is pick out one of those and put that under management of one of the Devops tools, and you can eliminate that from your top 10 list, right? So you have a metric. I don't know if anybody attended, if you were at CA World, if you attended Jeff Norman's presentation on collecting metrics and performance and KPIs, but that's where you start. You collect that metric, and then you can say from the key performance indicator, I'm going to reduce the number of tickets in the next 3 months that we get on this, right? And you put that under management, and you watch that just disappear, because all of a sudden permissions get reverted back before there's even an incident, before there's a job outage, before anything like that occurs, right? And you know, and so from Sean's question, back to that, it's a formal product put out by a company called Puppet Labs, and from a services offering, you know, I get involved in it in talking about really how best to implement it from best practices and architecture perspective. So, anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I don't see any, Dan. If anybody has, type them in the Q&A window, please, now. We'll give another 30 seconds.
I mean, you can always shoot me an email offline, you know, you can even do demonstrations or anything like that offline as well if you need something. But feel free to reach out to me afterwards, or Mark or Dexter can direct you to me if you need help. I tend to be around. So.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Len, for setting this up. Thanks, everybody. Our next webcast will probably be April the 14th. Everybody have a good next 3 months, and we'll talk to you in April. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.